this computer. Okay, if you don't want to be recorded, now's the time to go off camera at least. Well, how's everybody's photography going? Anybody got any exciting going? No.
Well, I'm going to go to Latvia to look at a lot of family roots and history and stuff. I've been communicating with. We have relatives in Ukraine, and I'm going to meet an older gentleman in Latvia that's done a lot of family tree stuff on our name. And there's people I didn't even know about in that family tree, except he writes it all in Russian. And he sent me like 20 pages today in Russian. And so I'm trying to go through it.
Does the Google Translate work very well on the?
I checked it out against some of the languages that I know, and it does sort of okay, but you have to be real careful with your wording because like some words have 2 or 3 meanings, and it'll choose one of the meanings that maybe you didn't intend.
Sure, that makes sense.
Do you still speak Latvian?
Yes, I do. In fact, I'm trying to brush up because I haven't spoken in a long time. And it's interesting, like learning like all the, Facebook terminology. And I learned, like shopping cart. And shopping cart is like, it uses a word that I learned as a basket. And so it's shopping basket. I learned it as a kid as a basket. And so it makes sense. It's a shopping basket, like where you put your items that you're purchasing and stuff. And I learned how to say wine tasting, to sign up for a wine tasting, the official way to say that, instead of just drink wine.
All the important stuff.
I'm getting down to the nitty gritty now.
That's wonderful.
Well, and where else could you just practice on Facebook then, Giannis? Or do you know anybody from there that you can talk with?
No, like all my relatives now that I could speak Latvian with, they've all died. But I just listened to Latvian news, and the dialect I learned is like, we're from a rural area, and the dialect I learned is kind of a rural dialect. And so I'm trying to learn like the big city, dialect and stuff. So.
Well, I had a student once who was Russian, and he came here and he told me he learned to speak English by listening to the Beatles, learning and translating Beatles songs. And hats off to anybody who can teach themselves a foreign language.
There's a big Latvian community in DC. You might check online to see if you could find that group and see if they have something on there.
I appreciate that. Actually, there's a pretty good sized group right here in Portland. Like they have like their own building and, like church services every Sunday. They just had a big, I guess it's this weekend, they're having a big bazaar, I guess. I keep forgetting the English word, the bazaar and stuff like that. So they're really active here too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and think about starting. Welcome everybody to the Portland Photographers Forum. I remember these faces all look familiar to me, but is anybody here who's visiting? I think tonight for the first time, maybe, or the first or second time. Do you want to introduce yourselves? No, everybody's familiar.
I paid my dues. This is my second time.
Okay.
Larry Blake, so might see more of me.
Right on. Well, we'd like to see more of you. I mean, if you've paid your dues, then we're happy you can come all you want.
As you could say, I'm a returning member. I haven't been active the last couple of years.
Oh, I remember you. You used to come all the time. I can't remember your name. What's your name?
Gary Wolf. Yeah,
That's right.
I recognize a handful of you guys, but not everyone.
I remember going on a weekend outing that you were at up there at Long Beach, across the bridge there from Astoria. I think we all went up there and did something.
Oh yeah, okay.
Right on. Well, good. Glad you're back around. Has
Hi,
anybody,
Mike.
oh, go ahead.
Hi, Mike. It's Johanna. Hello.
Joanna.
Has
Lots to
anybody,
tell you.
has anybody got any announcements they'd like to make that they've got something coming up that we should all know about or go see?
Yeah, actually, I'll start that out. I actually have a show in June at the Morse Coffee Company in Lake Oswego.
Nice.
So I don't know if totally the month of June. I'll be there the morning of June 4th, that's Saturday, 8 to 10. Just, it's not a formal opening or anything, but I'll just be there to chat with folks and have coffee and talk photography if you're around. But otherwise, the whole month of June, it's
Where
a
is-
corner of
where is
First and
this?
A in Lake Oswego.
On A Avenue?
Yeah, corner of First and A. It's the Morse Coffee Company.
Yeah, thank you.
Would you mind taking a minute and telling us how you arranged that? I'm trying to talk people into telling us about how they're getting traction for getting their work out.
Yeah, it was just through a connection. I have a friend who, like, he lives in that area and he's a regular at that coffee shop and just got to know the owners. And the nice thing about that place, it's something you guys might want to check out. They host a different artist each month. So I don't know how far they're booked out, but he that's just how he's trying to promote art in the community, and of course it brings him business as well. So
Nice. Well done.
it's actually his wife. There's a couple. She's doing a show this month, and she's doing photography as well. And it's actually kind of nice stuff if you're in that area.
Good. Thanks. Mr. O'Brien, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, things are moving along a little bit with the idea of going up to Opal Creek and starting to document the recovery of the forest. Sarah says that we're going to go up the first week of September, the Labor Day weekend, from the 4th, and we'll be able to stay for 3 or 4 days in cabin 4, which means that it'll be a scramble to get in and out, but you won't have to carry a lot of stuff. You won't need tents or that kind of thing. So if people are interested in participating in that, just drop me a note and let me know, and we'll start figuring that out.
So it sounds like still a hike in, but like you said, you don't have to haul all your stuff so much.
Right.
Nice. Okay, good. Oh, Alan.
Yeah, some of you may remember Barry Frankel.
Of course.
Yeah, I just wanted to let all the members know that Barry passed away. A lot of you may have known that he suffered from Parkinson's disease for quite a while, and I just want you to know that even though it was quite debilitating, especially toward the end, Barry never gave up on photography.
Wow.
But not just the equipment. He was buying lenses, selling lenses. He was still taking pictures whenever he could, buzzing down the street in his electric wheelchair, taking pictures. He still had a zest for that. And so, so the end of his life was not terrible.
Nice.
Yeah, go on.
No, I was going to thank you for letting us know. I mean, Barry was around for so long and such a friend to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you guys are real close. I know that.
Hmm.
35.
Whoop, hang on, Andrew.
Gotta run the load. You'll load the wash.
Is that directed at me?
No, I think had some background sounds.
Oh.
Well, I'm sorry, Alan, you hear that, and thank you for letting us know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there'll be a memorial service sometime in the future. It hasn't been decided yet, though.
Did that just recently happen?
He died last Tuesday.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for letting us know that.
Sure.
Anybody else have some news they'd like to share with us?
337. I've got to hear on the log. I'll get it right.
I don't know who that was. Okay.
I'm going to be in the community drawers June and July.
Oh, good. starting in June.
Yep. So I'm putting finishing touches on things right now.
So that's 10 pictures, right, Phil?
Yep.
Are this 10 what did I get anything new or what are you putting in?
They fit from the Duotone series.
Nice.
So
Do you know who you're sharing that drawer with?
good question. I've got an email around here somewhere.
I'm
Are you
just gonna.
Are you here tonight?
Drawer with Tim Dallas and for 1 month and Robert Bergstrom the other month.
Thank you, Andrew. I have 2 parts.
Well, good luck with that, Phil. I hope that goes well. I mean, that can be a nice place to get a lot of exposure.
I have a question for Phil. Phil, what are you going to do to promote your show there? I mean, that's an incredible venue. But, you know, it's like most of the people that do the drawer stuff do nothing to promote like their work in there. What are you going to do?
That's a real good idea. I typically, make up some show cards and pass them around the art supply places, the galleries where I know people. But I haven't done any of that yet. So, but this puts it up on the top of my mind. Thank you, Giannis.
Right on.
It's a great idea. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think we as PPF have anything new or big coming up in the really near future. We are doing monthly print shares on the first Monday from 6 to 9. If you guys want to come by the old space at the Multnomah Art Center with some prints. It's turned out to be a pretty good evening. We end up with 12 or 13 people showing work, and you get plenty of time to look at the work and talk about the work. And it's been good so far. So I encourage you to come on out for that if you can. Pardon me?
How many prints do people show?
Well, the rack is about 60 inches long. And so however many you can fit on 60 inches of shelf space is how many you get to put up. So typically it just depends on the size. If you've got big mats and stuff, you're going to be a little bit limited, but typically about, like I said, about 60 inches. Does that make sense? And the prints don't have to be matted. They can be held up there, or they can just lean up there loose and be fine. So if you want to just show us proof work or work prints, that's fine as well. The other thing that we do, we are looking at possibly having a PPF only group show at a local gallery, but we haven't got those details nailed down, or maybe a semi-local gallery. Anyway, an Oregon gallery. So look forward to hearing about that, but that probably won't be till the fall. The other opportunity you have to get your work in front of the PPF membership is by participating in the monthly challenge, which is this slideshow I'm about to do here. And that's where you can submit 8 pictures, and we have a theme, but we're pretty loose about adhering to the theme. So feel free to interpret that however you want. The link is usually published in the newsletter that talks about the meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and play that. It lasts about 8 or 10 minutes, I think. Here we go. If I can make this go.
Don't take that toll with me. I'm on your side, baby. We're coming close.
Alvin Charlie's Hester.
Your
That's where he lives too. How about Alvin and Charlie?
eyes, the open sea, and you're holding out on me. Why won't you talk to me? If holding is a word you need, go ahead and try me as far as I can see. Your arms are empty, so don't take that tone with me. I'm on your side, baby. Love, I'm holding on to anything I can to keep myself from falling down. Throw your arms around me, are you still astound me? Can you keep from falling down? As far as I can see, your eyes, the open sea, as far as I can see. Your arms are empty, can see your eyes, the open sea, and you're holding out on me. Why won't you talk to me? If holding is what you need, go ahead and try me as far as I can see. Your arms are empty, so don't take that tone with me. I'm on your side, baby. Love, I'm holding on to anything I can to keep myself from falling down. Throw your arms around me, are you still astound me? Can you keep from falling down? As far as I can see, your eyes, the open sea, as far as I can see. Your arms are empty, so don't take that tone with me. I'm on your side, baby.
Nice collection.
Okay. Thank you to everybody that submitted. It helps to have people submit to make it go well. So I want to encourage you all to do it every month. I think it's fun to see your pictures out there in front of everyone. It's Ken Hawkins. Are you still here, Ken? Can I put you on the spot? Maybe he's not. I was going to ask him about camera work gallery. Okay. Harley Cowan is here to talk to us tonight about his work. I think he is an exciting photographer who makes beautiful photographs of historical places that are important for a number of reasons. And I'm impressed by the way he's able to get this work made and get this work out and even find some people to help him get that done. And I'm anxious to hear about all those things. And I know Harley quite well, but I can't wait to hear this story. I haven't heard him speak before. So everybody, please welcome photographer Harley Cowan.
Thanks. No, this is so wonderful. I've been a guest a couple of times at events in the past, thanks to Ray, and it's really fun to be able to present to you guys. I was kind of surprised when Ray gave me the invitation, and I'm really excited about this. I've got a slideshow I put together. I'll try to. My intent is to kind of run through some of these things a little quick, just because I don't want to. I don't want to linger too long on anything in particular, but the whole point, I think I like to have a conversation. So if anybody wants to interrupt at any time, please do so. If there's something that I go by too quickly, please, and you want to see it, please tell me. We'll hop back. And this is really loose. So I was asked when I was putting something together to talk about what was your journey in photography. I don't know if this is normally what everybody does when they present at this, but what was your journey? What are things that you faced earlier in your career when you're trying to get your work out, and how did you do that? How did you solve those issues, and what keeps you kind of inspired to create art, and keeps you from getting discouraged during downtimes? And so I'll try to address those as we go through here. And if I don't, Ray, you know me, let's make this a conversation. So remind me, or let's pull me out of the presentation a little bit and say, okay, because some of the backstory with some of this stuff. So
I'll keep you on task.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Let's see here. I got to figure out how to present. So I guess share screen. Okay, here we go. Let me get this going and I will share it. Let's see. Okay. I think this is what I need to do. Are you guys seeing a screen?
Yes.
And are you seeing an actual slideshow, or are you seeing my version that shows the next slide up?
We're seeing your version.
Okay. Let's see here. All right, is that better?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Now it is.
Okay.
Nice. Oh, I can't wait. Okay.
So I just called it this Historic Wonderland because I have an exhibit coming up that is, I got invited to do an exhibit at the PDX airport, the rotating art exhibit. And it's a little bit of retrospective, sounds haughty and ridiculous. I've over the past about 5 years, I've done work at a bunch of historic sites. And so it kind of covers this period of time. But I guess to start out, when I began shooting, I've kind of shot for a long time, but I really started carrying a camera around when I was in college. I did a study abroad and I was in Russia, and this is my student ID from the time. And this was about 1995. And I had been given some advice that this is pre-internet, pre-anything. I was told that you better take black and white film because you're not going to be able to find any way to develop any film otherwise. And at this point in time, that information was about a year behind. And it turned out that no place in the city would develop black and white film except for one lab, because they had all gotten these little 1 hour development, machines like Walgreens would have, and everybody got rid of their black and white development. So I had all this black and white film, and I walked around with this little 35 millimeter camera, and I would take all these pictures in Vladivostok of daily life and take them to this lab. And somebody took them home to their darkroom and did these home prints of all of my negatives. I did do some color photography while I was there. This is my student group at the School of Architecture. We were doing a cleanup day, which was a kind of a holdover from communist times, where everybody went out and cleaned up the school or cleaned up town. And then the other picture here is a communist rally during the Yeltsin re-election. And then I was carrying this camera around and taking these pictures. And so now I have this, I would go to the lab and I would get back this brown wrapper, a brown piece of butcher paper with my photos in it, with these really rough cuts, like somebody ripped the edges along a straight edge or something. And they were kind of wonderful because they were, as you can see, really dusty, really kind of terrible prints, but they had this great character to them. And that's what finally made me think, I need to eventually, I had not worked in a darkroom before. And so I finally, fast forward many years later, I'd moved to Portland. I had a friend of the family kind of got me back into shooting film. I was shooting digitally for a long time and was not enjoying myself so much. And he said, well, have you ever shot medium format? What's medium format? I didn't even know at the time. And then I ended up getting a Rolleiflex, fell in love with this Rolleiflex, ended up building a darkroom at home. And then I was just off running, taking pictures all the time. And so I was taking pictures of family, my kids mostly, your captive models. I was, cataloging everything daily life with the Rolleiflex, what the kids were up to in the backyard. And then running around with my friends and my office events. I was photographing anything at my office, whether it was during hours or after hours. And then even when I would be out with my friends and stuff, I've constantly had this camera on me. So some folks were happier about me taking pictures, and some of them weren't as happy about me taking pictures of them. But I was constantly doing this. And then it was, I finally kind of decided to have a project. I'd never really had a project before. Now, I know that this is kind of a big thing for some photographers to think about, what is a project and what are you going to do? But remember, I'm an architect. Everything that we do are projects. So thinking in this kind of term, it didn't really, it was kind of a normal thing to think about. Okay, I'm gonna work in a project. And we had a trip that we went on with my father-in-law to Sicily. He was born in Sicily, and he had been diagnosed with lung cancer. And this was a big family trip for us to go and spend a month in Sicily. And so I decided to take just my Rolleiflex and just take, I took 40 rolls of 120 film with me, and that was it. I decided, no, I'm leaving everything else at home. I'm not doing anything with my digital cameras and that. I'm going to commit to this. And it ended up being kind of this wonderful record that we had of our time in Sicily with the kids and with my in-laws, at this a little town on the southern coast. And he had relatives that were still living there, so we spent time with them. And yeah, again, like most of the time when you're constantly running around with a camera, some people were kind of happy about it, and some people weren't quite as happy about it when you pulled the camera out on them. But I got all these pictures of my kids, and they're all kind of, and my father-in-law, all in this kind of timeless way with this camera. And it was really what made me want to do photography more full time. this was actually the last day of our trip and my last roll of film on our last day, and a wonderful shot of my wife and her mom. So then at some point after that, I knew Ray, I knew other photographers around town. I decided, well, I'm an architect. It would be nice to start using a large format camera and understand what that's all about. And so that's when Ray actually helped me out. I took a workshop with Ray and started trying out 4x5. And we were out on Sylvie Island, and this was a picture that we did during the workshop by the Howell House. And right about this time, I don't know if you remember this coming up in the news, but there was this job that came up with the Park Service, where they were talking about this Ansel Adams job with the National Park Service. And Ansel Adams never really did this job.
Yeah.
He did a mural project with Secretary Ikes, but he was never really a historic American building survey photographer. But this caught my attention, and kind of as an architect, it made me think, of all areas that I could kind of put some focus on, here was an area where I might be able to put a little bit more of an educated eye toward the photography I was doing than just kind of the candids and stuff that I'd been doing prior to that. So I looked into it. The Heritage Documentation Programs is a group within the Park Service, and they had two photographers that worked there forever. Jack Boucher did mainly the Historic American Building Survey, or HABS, and was there for 50 years. And Jet Lowe did AIR, which was the American Engineering Record. So this is like buildings, historic places, big engineering projects like bridges and dams and that. And then when this job came out, the guy who got the job was Jared Ortiz, and he kind of took over. They had not had a staff photographer at all. The only reason I bring this up was, I'd applied for this. I was absolutely not qualified to get it, and of course they told me so. But I actually got to know Jared after a while, and the program behind this is something that's been around since the 30s. It started in the New Deal, and I may be, I'm sure several of you know this, but this is a New Deal program that is still in operation today. And in fact, I think it's the only New Deal program that's still in operation today and is still accepting archival black and white negatives as their main source of information for the archives to go to the Library of Congress. The requirements are that everything is done by hand, that development by a machine is not archival enough for the Library of Congress. And so I got interested in this and thought, this is something I would like to do. And so I reached out to the Park Service, and eventually I found out there were two photos in the Historic American Building Survey of Bybee Howell, and they were both from 1934. And so I talked to the Park Service, and eventually they, after quizzing me about how my photo was developed and how all this stuff, this was my first photograph I got into the Historic American Building Survey. And that kind of put me on the road to do more of this work, going around and documenting historic places. So what happened there then was, the architecture firm I was working for had a little internal fellowship that they offered. And so you could apply, you could write a proposal, and they would, if it got accepted, you could go and do some, do a research project. So I wrote this thing, tongue in cheek, called Let's Make History, and actually got the fellowship, and it was like a little $5,000 grant. And so I used the money to do three things. I went to a preservation field school with that the University of Oregon puts on. So this is like where you go for a week, and every year it's different, and anybody in the public can do this, but they do some kind of historic preservation project. And it happened to be that this time they were restoring the CCC cabin at Mount Rainier. And then the other two projects I did along here was I reached out to the lessees of the Cloud Cap Inn up on Mount Hood, which is the Hood River Cragrats Mountain Rescue Team. And I reached out to some folks at B Reactor at Hanford, because I grew up in Eastern Washington. I grew up in Richland, Washington, right outside of Hanford. In fact, my high school summer job was making reactor fuel. So this was an area that I wanted to go and photograph for a long time. And anyway, so I used this little research grant as a reason to kind of develop these little projects. And so the field school actually turned out to be probably the single best thing I ever did for my photography. This put me in touch with so many people in historic preservation. It has led to access to all kinds of places and all kinds of projects, and I'm still in touch with most of these people today. In this picture, you can see me working on a big heavy timber there. We were replacing timbers on this cabin, and we had a group of professionals and a group of laymen who were being taught how to do, this stuff at a very basic level. In the lower left corner there, that's my friend Amy McCauley, who is a historic joiner she does work with on windows and doors exclusively, and all with hand tools. And she's now has now since moved from the Pacific Northwest out to Mount Vernon and works on George Washington's Mount Vernon home full time. But yeah, this is a picture of all of us when we were all done with our week, having replaced that timber up at the peak of the cabin. This was kind of a funny picture for me, because this is a Rolleiflex selfie with the little timer on the Rolleiflex, and it made me want. While we had been here this week, we had looked at a bunch of historic photographs of this cabin in order to get our preservation work done right, and it made me wonder if some point somebody 100 years from now will look at a picture like this, and because we saw pictures of the construction crew that were working on the cabins nearly 100 years ago.
So Harley, you say that this, can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah,
You
please.
said it was super important, but not necessarily because you learned how to do joinery or put that giant beam in, but because you met people to help you later.
You're right. And I did gloss over that. What I found out going to this, part of this field school is really a networking opportunity. And I think U of O treats it that way. And I think because in the historic preservation field, there's an awful lot that happens because of people knowing one another and their relationships to one another. And I didn't know at the time that how important that would be, but most of the people in this photograph, I don't know if you can see my cursor floating around.
We can.
But Don Peeting here, he is the head of the department and professor emeritus. He introduced me to a guy named Hank Florence, who was a historical architect with the National Park Service. And he's the guy who, he came to this field school this week that we were there, and I got introduced to him. And we were told to have your little 30-second elevator speech ready for anybody you met. Well, I met Hank and I'm talking to him, and I said, well, yeah, I'm a photographer, I'm an architect, and I have been trying to get out to Hanford to photograph B Reactor. which is where I grew up. And he goes, wait a minute, are you the guy? What had happened was I had placed a request with Department of Energy to go out to B reactor, and they had kicked it over to the National Park Service for a thumbs up or thumbs down. And this was the guy whose desk it was on. And he said, well, let's talk tomorrow. And so the next day we talked, and I explained my story to him, and I grew up there and on and on and on. He said, okay, I think we can give you permission to go out and photograph B reactor. And so had it not been for me going to this field school, I don't know that this project that I'm going to show here in a minute ever would have happened.
Right.
And like, other people in this picture, this is Susanna, who's a wood scientist. This is Amy that I talked about. This is, I've got, these guys are with the Park Service. All of these people have kind of helped get me access to places that I might not get into otherwise. And so it was a fortuitous thing to go and do.
Nice.
Amy, my friend Amy here, who's the carpenter, she gave me this little bit of advice that I have held on to ever since. She said, find your niche and dig it deep. and that was kind of her approach to what she was doing with working with windows and doors. Was she has a couple of degrees in history and historic preservation, and that's how she ended up being recruited by Mount Vernon to come out and do all of their restoration work, because she found her niche and really dug in. And it's one of those little pieces of advice that I think is just useful for anybody.
Nice.
Take a look at what is really your niche, and how can you really invest in that. And I think that's part of why, when I said, as an architect looking at historic buildings and stuff, I can come to this with a more educated eye, and it's an area where I can make probably a better contribution than I could be photographing something else. So the second part of that little fellowship, I went up to Cloud Cap Inn, which is 50 years older than Timberline. It's not been recorded in the Historic American Building Survey, even though Timberline's got hundreds and hundreds of photos. The cabin was built in 1889. It's 133 years old now. It survived 2 wildfires, and it also survived almost being burned down by the Park Service, because it was in the 50s, it was an asset that they were maintaining that they didn't really want to spend the money to maintain.
Jesus.
So it's phenomenal that it still exists. And when you think about, this was built in 1889 by William Ladd and C.E.S. Woods. If you know anything about Portland history, C.E.S. Wood was an attorney, but he was also the guy who took down Chief Joseph's surrender speech, "I shall fight no more forever." And William S. Ladd was the son of, what's his father's name? Ladd, who built Ladd's Addition, who was a banker in Portland. Anyway, they built this cabin up here on the mountain when there was no, there's no way to get up there except by horse and coach. This little picture.
Harley?
Yeah.
Is these Cloud Cabin older than the Snowshoe Club?
Yeah, it is. It's right next to the Snowshoe Club, but it's the first thing that was built, first permanent structure that was built there up on Cooper Spur, Cloud Cap area. It sits up right at Timberline. Here's some of the trees that were burned in the Gnarl Ridge burn in 2008. It's shuttered most of the time. It isn't open to the public. The Hood River Cragrats have a long-term lease on the building from the Forest Service. They're really the reason that the building is still around. That's how it got saved from being burned in the 50s. And I got to go up there twice. The first time was in the fall, and I went to a club meeting. And then the second time pictured here was when in the spring, and they took me up in a snowcat. Got to spend a couple of days in the cabin, taking a few pictures of the building, hanging out with the mountain rescue team, and this is kind of their clubhouse too.
So that
we-
last one, Harley, would that be like a -10 according to the zone system in Ansel Adams?
Right? Yeah, pretty broad.
So we got the snow lid mountain and the dead. Okay, that's just an
Yeah, totally. All of these guys wear these checkered shirts. They have for years. It's the oldest mountain rescue team in the country, and not. It's been around for, I think, 90 years. This is one of the large format shots I got of the interior. So that's an original wall that we're looking at in the living room of the building. And this is also, as Ray knows, this is where I learned about reciprocity failure the hard way. They have a couple of rooms in the building that have signatures that are almost as old as the building itself. So guests used to sign their name when they would come in and stay in one of these rooms.
Look at those dates. Wow, I haven't seen that picture. That's great.
And then the third project was the Manhattan Project, going out to Hanford, and so if I don't know if anybody knows Eastern Washington, but the Hanford Reservation is about half the size of Rhode Island. It's pretty big, and the Columbia River flows through, and B reactor is up along the river. And the B reactor was the first full-scale nuclear reactor ever made. It produced plutonium for the Manhattan Project. And I went out there, and I had I was given 4 days of access. I spent the first half day getting a bunch of safety training, and then I had the rest of the time to shoot whatever I could shoot in that time. And it was 4x5. I ended up shooting about 170 sheets of film, I think, all said and done. The landscape here, you're seeing B reactor is kind of the main building with the stack. C reactor is the squared off building. That's been cocooned. So it used to look just like B reactor, but it's been stripped, everything's been stripped away and it's been cocooned. And then in the distance are the K reactors, which were after World War II.
So Harley, you weren't using ready loads. You were actually loading, like the, 2x2.
Yeah, I was, yes, I had just your regular old two-sided film holders, and I had, I think I owned 30 of them, or maybe 32. And so I'd shoot what I had, and then I'd go to my parents' house and run into the bathroom and put a towel under the door and pull out all the film and reload them all and get ready for the next day.
So how many shots did you do a day?
It was at least 40 a day. Yeah, it was a little 42, 44, 45, something like that.
So you only had to run to your parents' house once a day.
Well, every night I would come home. Yeah. So every day I would shoot about 40 sheets, and then come back and do it again the next day.
That's work.
Let's see here. Yeah, there you go. That's kind of I was shooting a Scene F2, which is still my field camera, and it's been great. And once I, like I think with as a lot of you know, once you shoot a 4x5 negative and you start to blow that stuff up, it's kind of hard to do anything else. It's kind of amazing what you can get out of a 4x5 negative. And since and I've stuck with this kind of system, I've really just been doing silver gelatin because that's kind of what the building survey uses. And I still feel like, you know, there's so much craft involved. It's just, I still just enjoy it very much all the time.
So Harley, I have another question. On the previous slide, you showed the back of the camera and the ground glass. And were you on psychedelic drugs or something like that? Because the thing isn't upside down and, you know, sideways.
You know, I had it the other way, and I probably should have left it that way.
Yeah.
I did. I consciously flipped it around in this slide.
Nice.
I knowing my audience, I probably should have left it the way it was.
Nice, Harley. You're funny.
So Harley, you were not on psychedelic drugs, and this was not exactly what you saw through the viewfinder.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just checking.
That's great.
Nice. That is.
This gives you this just gives you an idea of scale. There's my pickup truck next to this thing. So sometimes it's kind of hard to tell what the real scale of this is, and it gives you a little context. But I ran around the building, you know, I was taking pictures all over, getting details and stuff too, and you know, getting in on the building. The building is made out of cast in place concrete and concrete block. They used concrete block where they could be was a little bit faster. So all the mission critical stuff is cast in place concrete, and the stuff that they could afford to move a little faster with, they made out of block.
So Harley, I have one more question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So when you were out there shooting this thing, did you have kind of a shoot list that, you know, I've got to get this and I've got to get that? And
yeah. So usually the Historic American Building Survey, there's a set of guidelines that the Secretary of the Interior puts together that, and it varies depending on the historical significance of the building. It's more intensive the more historically significant the building is. So usually what they would want to get is they want to get a straight on elevation of every side of the building, which is what we're looking at here, you know, a straight on shot. They want a perspective, and then they want interiors, important interiors, and then any specific details that speak towards craftsmanship or construction. So you have kind of a rough idea, but I was also working pretty quick, and I, you know, was kind of just a little bit flying by the seat of my pants. And fortunately, I didn't have a client, so I didn't have a deliverable, you know.
Right.
And part of it was, you know, I'd been out to the building a couple of times before. I'd gone on a tour before, and I'd been out probably 2 or 3 times prior to this. So I had a little bit of an idea what I was getting into, but not entirely. And here, in fact, let me go back. If you look down at the bottom, you can kind of see this oil tank. It's sitting on that concrete pad in the foreground, right in the middle. This was just one of these things that I kind of made this more for myself than for a historical record. There's no real significance to this oil tank, but
the shape and the light is just exquisite there. I mean, that's the thing about you, Harley. That is, it's just like an ugly detail, you know, ugly thing, but you've made this beautiful photograph, I think, of it.
I love the, you know, the rusted duct on one side and the worn out wood on the other side, and you know, these rubber hoses and stuff and all the debris on the ground. It's kind of a neat, the faded paintwork on the tank. A lot of textures.
Yeah.
A lot of textures in a lot of things, you know, old wooden door and all these old signs on it, these old ducts. And so it was kind of fun. You could kind of point your camera at any of these things and just had a lot of patina and texture to pick up. And then I got to go inside, and this, I'd been inside before, but this it's really is something. If you haven't been on a tour, I highly recommend scheduling a tour and going out to B-Reactor. It's fascinating. And when you get to walk inside the building, it's kind of a ziggurat. And so you walk down these low corridors, and when you walk in the middle, it opens up like a cathedral, and it's quite amazing. You're on this face, this is the loading face. So this is where they would put the reactor fuel into these process tubes. So there's a lot of space here on this side. So you get a really good perspective on this reactor core. And here's that's the photo I got from here. And it's just a fascinating piece of engineering. On the last day, we got to run upstairs and had to do a little Geiger counter test because it still is a radiation zone, but this is up on top of the reactor core that we just looked at. And these are all the safety rods that would drop into the reactor in case in case it got out of control. I'm going to try to cruise through a little bit because I think I'm dragging on time here. We got to go into the control room and take some pictures. These are the Venturi valves that monitor every one of those tubes on the reactor face. There's this equipment in here. This was actually kind of a funny one where I asked one of the guys on site, so what's interesting here that maybe people don't normally get to see? And he's like, oh, well, let me open up this panel. And he opens up this panel on this monitoring equipment in the control room to show me this wiring on the inside. And so I got this nice up close of this wiring harness. It's one of my favorite picks. They've got a old D-cell battery to keep the vacuum tubes warm, and all the wiring is tied together with wax string. It's just beautiful. And I wouldn't have ever got this picture had I not asked somebody on site what's interesting. I didn't assume that I could just tell what was worth taking a picture of. And then the control, this is the reactor operator's station. And a much younger me years ago, this is out of some Department of Energy brochure or something, but I years ago got to talk to Dee McCullough, who was the guy sitting at the controls when the reactor went live in 1944. And it was funny because at that time I got this picture taken sitting in Dee's chair at the controls. And so when I came back this time, Dee had passed away at this point, but I was setting up for this shot, and the chair that was sitting there looked like this chair, except it was painted black, and it didn't look very worn. And so I asked somebody, I said, well, what's the deal with the chair here? I don't think that's the right chair. And they said, oh, you want the real chair? And they had taken the chair and they'd put it in a closet because everybody wants to sit in it. So they had bought a newer version of the chair. So we rolled out Dee's original chair before I got the photograph, which was, again, one of these things I just wouldn't have known had I not visited earlier. And it's kind of a cool detail that we managed to put into the photograph before.
Harley, can I ask a quick question? Just kind of looking at like this older photograph, it looks like that cabinet is already very well used. I mean, like, are they using recycled equipment or something in this thing?
Well, this photograph here, this is my photograph. So this was made, in 2017. So that's all the wear and tear that you're seeing from, yeah. Okay. But this is what I'm saying. We got Dee's chair in the picture, whereas if I hadn't stopped for a second, we would have had the new chair sitting here, and it wouldn't have been quite as correct a picture, so to speak. And there were, I'll did somebody have a question? I'll skip through these really quick, but there are some pre-Manhattan project sites. There's the old Hanford High School. We got to visit. There's the Brueggemann warehouse, the Brueggemann farm. This is a family that was evicted by eminent domain when the reservation was created. That's the interior. And then there's a little town called White Bluffs that was, everybody was evicted here. They were rehabilitating this. This is a bank, and they were rehabilitating it so that it could be used as a visitor's site. One of the interesting things about this was they had this sign painted on the back that they were trying to maintain. And this is what happened to the sign. Somebody knocked one of the letters off when they were refinishing the sign. See if I've got another, yeah. So I did get a picture at the time with the sign intact. So this is probably the last picture ever made with that sign intact on the building. Got a little press for some of this. The Washington Trust, I ended up, this kind of led to some partnerships where I started working with some historic preservation groups like the Washington Trust for Historic Preservation, and then later on some other projects with Restore Oregon. And I think that's a really important aspect to doing some of this stuff, is having a partner that you can work with that where you can kind of serve a bigger cause than just, you know, the photography can go towards, you know, creating an archive and helping out organizations that are trying to preserve some of this history for other people down the road. I'm going to skip through some of this. We had a little, that was a little gallery exhibit. The first time I got to have a solo gallery exhibit, we had me and a sculptor. This is in my hometown of Richland. And at the very end, we had a opening, so I got to see a bunch of my old high school friends and stuff. And then later we got a visit from General Mattis, who is also a Richland native. So that's my little claim to fame, was I got to have the Secretary of Defense drop by to take a look at some photos.
See some red dots there. It couldn't have been that little a show, Harley.
I did all right in that show. That was a fun show. It's a small gallery, a beautiful little gallery, and it was kind of fun to come home and be kind of get to do something like that in your own hometown.
Nice.
It was just a blast. So since then, I've partnered with a couple of different organizations, and one of them was the University of Oregon. They've had me back for their field school to kind of demonstrate photography to their historic preservation students. This is us up at the Watzik House, which the University of Oregon owns here in Portland. So usually about every year I'll come out and we'll do a workshop for one of their classes with their students. There we go. And we'll let the students get behind the camera and we'll make pictures of this place. They were doing a survey of the building. So they're measuring the building and they're creating documents about the building. And we'll let them do the HABS photography for the building too. This is the living room in Watzik House.
Nice.
Let's see here. Getting some of the details, the panel in the wall with the record player, and this is one of the other rooms in the house.
Is it a day bed or something?
It's that room was called the Venetian room because of the Venetian blinds that are built in, and they're pocket blinds that slide into pockets into the wall. So they disappear entirely. Yeah, there's a day bed in there, and Aubrey Watzik was a lumber baron. So the house, when John Yon designed it, it's very expressive of wood, and it's a beautiful home. And you can get tourists to go up to see that. It's just over in the West Hills. Built in 1938, I think. So through University of Oregon and their program, that's been another real positive relationship that, like I said, that field school kind of started everything. And so I got to go down and take the last pictures of the East Grandstands at Hayward Field about 2 days before they got demolished. This is just a detail of some of the benches. These benches were saved and put into the new stadium. Additionally, I did a artist in residence with the National Park Service and went down to Oregon Caves. Took a few photos while I was down there of the chateau at the Oregon Caves. And this was a few months before it was getting ready to be completely refurbished. So I got some of the last pictures of the chateau with its furnishings and everything in place. I was there for a couple of weeks. And then it was about, 6 months later or so, I got an invitation from Jared Ortiz, who is the, if you remember, the National Park Service photographer that I showed earlier on for heritage documentation. He called me up because he was coming out to document the place. So I went to visit him and kind of tag along with him while he photographed the same building. So here's Jared doing his setup for getting hallways and stuff and that. His setup was a lot more advanced than mine. He's got a lot more lighting and he's also shooting 5x7. But we had a fun time. It was absolutely vacant and nobody around. I've done a little bit of photography for ODOT lately. They've had a lot of bridges that they're doing mitigation work for. So mitigation means that they're getting rid of it. They need to make a historic record of it before it goes away.
Mitigation means destruction?
Mitigation is, what it means is that you're mitigating the loss of the historic structure. So in this case, this is in Pendleton. This bridge no longer serves its function. And so ODOT had decided that it was going to come down. But because it's a historic structure, it's protected by the National Historic Preservation Act. That doesn't mean that you can't take it down. It just means that you have to mitigate its loss if it's deemed that it can be taken down. And so part of that mitigation is to photograph it. So we did some photographs of the details and of the bridge itself. I've done this for a couple of bridges. This is another bridge that is coming down in Scottsburg on the Umpqua River. And then this is a bridge I just did recently down in, what's it called? Oak Ridge, south of Salem. And that's been some interesting work. The connection with ODOT came out of that field school again, because some of the students at the field school who graduated from U of O have then gone on to work at ODOT. And so then this should kind of wrap things up. A year ago, I got a fellowship from the Architecture Foundation of Oregon, and that was kind of a ramped up version of that first grant that I got from my firm to kind of run around and take pictures of places that have not been documented. And first one we did was I went back to Bybee Howell and got a new picture of that, Ray. So
Nice.
I think here's the old one and there's the new one.
Why did you want the sun back there?
It just happened that we were there at that time. And as you know, Ray, I kind of have this tendency to shoot towards bright objects. It's a really bad tendency. We were actually there to film a little mini documentary. And so I took the picture while I was there just to take it. But
so when you applied for that grant, is that the kind of your activity? Is that the kind of thing that grant typically funds, or were you pushing the envelope?
This is a good question. Because
this is a substantial grant, right?
$25,000.
Okay.
It's I one of the things that I think has been very helpful, and this kind of goes back to the, find your niche, right? I could go after a photography grant. However, this grant was for architects. And so it was an open-ended grant. It happens annually. And Vannevar Bailey was an architect who decided to create a foundation, and it was to give mid-career architects basically a year of sabbatical to kind of do some research project that they had a passion about. So because it's very open-ended, it's a wonderful grant. And I applied a couple of years for this one, and got turned down, but told to please try again. And the third time was the charm. And I think trying to find a similar grant as a photographer rather than as an architect would be a tougher sell. There's a lot more competition for that. But this was one where it was strategic to go after something that was a little outside in order to do photography.
Like the Halley Ford, that's a similar kind of grant, but no mortal ever gets it.
Exactly. With this, I got to run. It got curtailed a little bit by COVID, but I did get to go over to the Gordon House, the Frank Lloyd Wright House in Silverton, and do a little photography there. Got to. This was kind of a funny one. There's another group called Docomomo, which is the documentation and conservation of the modern movement. It's a conservation group for mid-century architecture. And this is a little church that it doesn't exist anymore, but was over in Selwood, in Eastmoreland, technically. And I got to go in here and get a few pictures of this a couple of weeks before it got torn down. I also got a call from Restore Oregon, and they're the caretakers for the Jansen Beach Carousel, which is now in storage. And they were doing a documentation project to go through all the components of the carousel. And I got to go along, and we did a documentation of all the horses and some other components of the carousel. So they had these movers that came in, and they brought every horse out of storage, and we set them up. And I didn't do this with large format. I thought we were really pushing through. It was a real process. We had a couple of days, and we had 88 horses to photograph, and so I pulled a Hasselblad out, and we did about half a dozen shots of each horse, different angles and different details. And so let's see here if this will come up. There we go. So we started getting pictures of each horse, some of the details, the saddles, the cantle, which is the back of the saddle, they had some rosettes on them. They had, looking at the horseshoe here where it says C.W. Parker, which was the maker of the carousel. The carousel is C.W. Parker made a bunch of carousels, but they were all portable carousels that went with like carnivals and such. The Jansen Beach carousel is one of two that this company made that was meant to be a permanent carousel. And the other one doesn't exist anymore. So this is the only C.W. Parker carousel that is a permanent carousel that's still in existence. So this was kind of an inventory that was done prior to starting a restoration project for all the horses. So we wanted to get a record of the horses before they got stripped and refinished. And here's one of the details. I kind of like this one. Looking up at the top of the saddle, the cantle. This is a fish. And then there were some other elements of the carousel, like the bench on the carousel had these lions on the side of it, and up above, they had these rounding panels on the top of the carousel that had these cherubs. All of this is going to end up being part of an exhibit at Oregon Historical Society Museum in November.
Nice.
And then the last part of the fellowship was we went into the Multnomah County Courthouse, and I had a couple of days to run around and take some pictures before they vacated the courthouse. So ran around from courtroom to courtroom, trying to get a few details and a few room shots.
Is that crazed paint or is that some kind of detail?
Going back to the benches, it's marble on the walls.
Oh, how about on the benches?
It's wood.
Wow.
That's just the whatever kind of wood they use. It's all natural finished.
Nice.
It's kind of a wormy wood. This was all 4x5, and some beautiful stair details. This railing was really kind of amazing. Down into the basement, that shot actually was kind of a fun one to play around with camera movements and try to figure out how to get your focus in the right spot. And then up on top, they had the county jail. So the picture on the left is solitary confinement cell door, a little bit of graffiti scratched into the paint at the top. And the one on the right was the Minoru Yasui jail cell. So he was the Japanese American who was detained and held in the Multnomah County Courthouse during World War II for almost 2 years.
Oh, Lord.
That jail cell was taken apart, and this is a few days before, which you can see all the Sharpie marks on the walls. They were going to come in and cut this apart, and it's now at the Japanese American Museum in Portland. And I'll end on this. This is one of my favorites. This is the jail cell door selector. Just kind of a crazy mechanism, and it's similar to the mechanisms that they have down at Alcatraz, if you've ever gone through there, but the dial selects the door and the lever gets pulled to open or close the door. Just an amazing little piece of equipment. So I've got an exhibit coming up at PDX. Blue Mitchell asked me to be on his podcast here this summer, and then in November we'll have the Oregon Historical Society exhibit on the 100th anniversary for the Jansen Beach Carousel.
Right on. Have you recorded that thing with Blue yet?
Not yet.
Gotcha. Well,
so it could be fall, or it could be who knows.
At the beginning, you said you'd been invited to show at the airport. Was that just a random invitation in the mail, or were you proactive in that?
I was proactive in that. That's a great question. We when we did the Vannevar Bailey Fellowship, one of the things we wanted to do was create a final report. And so the way I did that was I have a friend of mine who's a videographer named Corey Kaufman, and he came along with me to a few sites and took some video of me doing this and that. He made a about an 8-minute mini documentary, and he entered it in the Portland Film Festival in October. And then after that, he made a comment about, I wish we could get this thing shown in the Hollywood Theater in the PDX airport, because that's the kind of thing they do, is these Oregon-centric short films. And so I kind of said, well, why don't we? And so then when we were thinking about it, I said, well, they have a rotating art exhibit or art program. And I said, why don't we put a proposal together for both the short film and some prints? and so we submitted that and got a positive response. So Wendy Given is the curator out there, and she got in contact with me, and she said they've been wanting to do something that tied the art program and the movie theater together, but they had not figured out what it was going to be. And our proposal showed up at just the right time. So
Well done.
that, so that should be next month in June, that'll start. And so they'll have the simultaneous screening at the theater and the photos on the wall just down the hallway.
Nice. The two grants that you talked about receiving, is there any deliverables to that? Do you have to do something? You have to,
The first grant was really they just wanted to see that you did something, and it was just so the work that I'd done was kind of the deliverable for that. The Van Ever Bailey thing, again, it was fairly open-ended. You wrote your own proposal, so you had to follow through with what you proposed, and then they wanted to have some way to promote your work or show your work and demonstrate to the public that what had been done with the grant. So that's where the little mini documentary film kind of came into play. It was a way to show what we had done in a little consumable package. And yeah.
nice. Good.
Harley, I'm kind of curious. This is Giannis again, and
Yeah.
it's like, what did you learn about architecture from photography, and what did you learn about photography from your architecture background?
That's good. Like I said initially, the project thing was, one thing that we do in architecture all the time. So I think going into photography with the idea about doing a project is not was a pretty easy transfer. But I think when you take some time to really look at a building and deconstruct what it is that makes it important, you start to look at it with a lens, and what are you going to capture, and why are you capturing it, and what are you communicating to somebody about why this is important. It's definitely informative as an architect. It makes you, it makes me anyway, think more about the kind of work that we're putting into putting a detail together. Are we really, it made me respect a lot of the architects who've come before me a lot more than maybe I had leading up to that. I think I understood, had a much better understanding of the amount of work that went in to make something look simple and make something look clean. And honestly, that's something that we all try to do in photography anyway, isn't it? You try to do something that looks really that speaks very directly and expresses something very clearly, and it isn't as easy as it looks. And so it's it's an interesting two sides of the same thing. Trying to think of how else to answer your question, because I know that there are other things that have happened in the process, but that's the first thing that comes to mind to me, is just having a greater respect for the amount of work that it takes to make something truly effective and clear. And
I think your affinity for history, Harley, allows you to research and understand your subject, much like a lot of people do with a portrait of, say, an author. They read the books, or you make portraits of your friends and you know them well. I think that you have an affinity for history and detail, and I think that's how you get to know your buildings, and your photography shows that, I think.
it's funny too, just to speak about photography, it's been exciting to work with a 4x5 camera and actually have to deal with movements and have to do everything very deliberately and manually. And it's, again, I sometimes I think you have to put your hands on something and really invest a little bit of effort to realize what went into something that somebody else made. I don't know. There's so much more to it than you realize up front, and I think that's one of the things that I find kind of interesting right now with a lot of younger photographers that I talk to. It's more about putting a label on it or being an influencer or like trying to figure out how to something that looks like something that is trending, or I feel like the investment is fairly shallow compared to what I see other photographers doing. And I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm kind of riffing here, but it's I wish that there are some photographers, like for example, Ray, you and I know we know a number of photographers, younger photographers who are working today, and I think of Ashley Jennings, for example. Ashley's a younger generation photographer who's doing really invested in doing tintypes and doing them well, and that's a whole different level of commitment than I see from a lot of other photographers of her generation, and I think the work shows it, right? So I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm trying to go with that, but
that's all right.
But it's fascinating. I think it takes some real investigation and some real work to then have the ability to step back and say, okay, this is this work that I'm familiar with. Now I have a sense of what it really took to make that work, what really went into it that I may not have realized several years ago.
So Harley, maybe my last question will be then, where do you continue to find that energy? Because I mean, obviously, I don't want to dwell on you being an architect by the daytime, but what I want to know is, like, a lot of people would just say, I don't have time, or I can't do this in the evening. I can't work all day and go in my darkroom and make prints for 3 hours. I mean, where do you continue to find that passion and just in that interest to keep going forward? Because I know you're planning a trip to the Arctic, for God's sakes.
Yeah, that's the next one. I've got a residency to go to Svalbard and spend 3 weeks on a tall ship, and I think I'm going to do that. I'm still trying to decide if it's going to be medium format or large or both, but we're going to put a darkroom on the ship, and I get to go play Herbert Ponting for a couple of weeks, and I don't know. It's funny. It's like, well, here's how I can answer that, right? We've talked about Michael Parker, right? Michael Parker, you and I know, he's this guy who lives out in Oysterville, and he's an old landscape architect, and I know him through a bunch of contacts, and he's kind of the guy that got me back into shooting film. I went out to visit this guy for other reasons out in Oysterville, and I had my DSLR and my bag of lenses and spent the weekend out there. And after an hour or two, he started laughing at me. And I'm pulling these big lenses out, I'm changing the lens, I'm taking photos of this, that, and the other. And he's just kind of looking at me like, what are you doing, kid? And anyway, so that was that. He's a very old school kind of guy. And so it was another month later, I said, Mike, I've been doing, I've been doing this, I've been doing that. I love photography, but I'm just kind of fed up. I just don't know what I need to do to kind of be re-energized or reinvigorated. And that's when he said, well, why don't you drop all that gear and just simplify? He said, have you ever worked with a box camera? And I said, well, yeah, I know a box camera. I don't know that I want to do that necessarily. And he goes, well, how about medium format? And that's when we kind of had this conversation, and he pulled out a Mamiya 645 and a couple rolls of film and handed it to me and said, go shoot this for a couple of weeks and tell me what you think. So I figured out how to load it. And I went back to Portland, and I'm walking around with this camera on me the whole time. It's kind of a brick, and but I was shooting stuff and I was having a good time. And it was about 3 shots into the second roll when I realized, like, I think I'd taken a picture of one of my kids or something, and someone blinked in the instant that I snapped the shutter. And I knew it. Like, I didn't have to look at a screen on the back, to see if I got the picture or not. I knew in that instant that, oh, you blinked right as I hit it. And that was the moment where it was like, I forgot what this was like. I used to know this stuff. I used to shoot, and you knew that. You'd take a picture and you knew in that instant you couldn't look, right? You knew that it happened. And so that was kind of a key to me, there was something going on there. So I decided to kind of stick with the camera, and after, I don't know, shooting several rolls, I was just like re-energized just by the process, just by slowing down a little bit. I think that was a big part of it, not trying to shoot 1,000 shots, but just trying to shoot one good one. And being in the moment when I would snap that shutter and know whether or not I was doing the right thing. And that engagement with the camera was really key to getting me excited about photography again. Then I went and took the darkroom class with Ian Beckett up at Clark College, and I just hadn't done that before. Maybe that was a good thing too, because I had not been there, done that. I didn't do it in high school or college, and I'd always kind of wanted to get in the darkroom, but I just hadn't done it. And so that was a new discovery. And that, it's just, again, slowing down, going through the process, the magic of having that image pop up on your paper. That one still gets me. Like, I can go into I've got a dark room right here in the basement, and I can go in there and put a piece of paper in the developer. And when that image pops up to the top, I still get that little bit of tingle. I don't know why, but it's just, there's something a little bit magical about all of that. And it's, I don't know. I think the other aspect to it, Ray, is just that there's a craft to it that's not, it's a little bit ephemeral. You kind of have to work at it, and you kind of have to, there's a little bit of alchemy to it. So,
well, maybe you're as equally investing in the activity of taking pictures and the outcome.
Yeah.
Because if we just invest strictly in the outcome, we're apt to be disappointed half the time. But if 50% of our enjoyment of photography is in the activity of making the pictures,
yes,
good or bad, then you're happy half the time and really happy 3/4 of the time.
Yeah.
And then there's another portion. So then you have failures, which we all do in the final object. It's not so devastating if your enjoyment is found in making and dealing with the object and making the photographs, and forget about it. And process helps make that happen. But in whatever your process is, if you are invested in the activity as much as the outcome, then you're apt to stay interested longer, I think.
Absolutely. No, that's great, Ray. That's 100%. There's no downside, right? I mean, even the mistakes are positive.
Because you had a good time doing it.
Absolutely. And there's something to learn, and it's just one more step down a path. It's yeah.
Hey, Ray.
Yeah.
It's Randy. I just wanted to say that what you just said was really insightful and helpful to me, because there's been a lot of different art things that I've gotten involved in where it was the outcome I loved, and the process I just couldn't stand. And so this is So this has been really helpful because I actually do enjoy both parts of it. I would just say that I can't always count on it being at least a 50-50 win. Sometimes it's a 0-50.
Gotcha. Oh, but I think there's something to be said for just enjoying the process, because if you're only counting the outcome, it can be hard. So thank you for saying that, Randy, because I never thought about that possibility where maybe it's really a brutal process, but then you like the outcome some of the time. So good.
Well, I don't know about the rest of you. I spend all day on a computer screen. I don't need to spend all day on a computer screen when I'm doing my fun stuff. For me, that's another side of it too. Maybe I would feel different if I was not on a computer for work all day, but yeah.
Right on. Okay. Anybody else have questions for Harley? I think it's been kind of a long go here.
Well,
but-
I'd just like to say that I come from a family of architects, so I've always been interested in buildings and lines and angles and all that stuff. But your pictures are really beautiful, and they're really interesting. And I appreciate the chance to look at a very mundane, in some ways, object and see the beauty in it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you about the Gordon House, and then you mentioned it later in the program. Is there a way to get to that place and take pictures of it without going on a tour and having all the people around and everything?
It's a good question. For me, the having the fellowship was kind of my reason, and I just reached out to them and I said, look, I'm working on this grant. The way I approached it with them was the Gordon House is not in the Historic American Building Survey. In fact, a lot of Frank Lloyd Wright properties are not, honestly. The Gordon House, we're kind of lucky that it's not run by the Frank Lloyd Wright Conservancy, because they tend to shut down the ability to go photograph it, because they want to maintain control over all photography in any of the Wright properties that are under their stewardship. You could definitely reach out to it's a small organization, it's a couple of people, and they were very accommodating. It helped that was one where it actually helped that it was the pandemic, because they weren't doing tours. So I was able to kind of get into the building when they had stopped tours, and that worked out well for them. But they do have different seasons. Like the summer season, they're busy with tours, and then in the fall or the winter, they curtail them. And so I would recommend with a group like that, if you're trying to get in there, to talk to them about when they're not doing tours, and try to arrange a time then.
Appreciate it.
Anybody else? Last
Just to say
call.
thank you, Harley. Those are really wonderful photographs. It just is a real delight to go through all your work with you.
Thanks so much, and thanks for having me. And I hope I didn't drone on too long.
No, not long enough.
That was perfect, Harley. That's what we hoped for, I think. All right, everyone. We'll see you Monday, first Monday in June, with print in hand, smiles on your faces, 6 p.m. Multnomah Arts Center. Otherwise, good night for tonight.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, Ray.
Well
All
done,
good?
Harley. I think that went really well. Good job. Thank you.
Right on. Thanks for having me. That was a kick.
Yeah. Don't you think it helps a little to talk about your work, to kind of see it fresh again? And
It always helps to talk about work and to show it. I think you're absolutely right. It's like, it's a healthy thing to do.
yeah, but I think it's like also, it's like, I mean, you can't lie to yourself in public. Right? You can show,
Yeah.
I had a photographer once, what's his name? Sam Abel said, if you're wondering if your pictures are good, show it to a group of photographers and you'll know within 2 seconds. soon as you project it or show it to a group of photographers, you know, and that's true. It's like, so you can think about all you want at home. And then when you put it out, you say, well, okay, now I see this for what it really is. And
For
I
sure.
think that helps.
It's definitely helpful. It's, you know, that's one of the things I meant to mention it earlier. You know, you've done the Lyceum stuff. I was going to bring that up, and I could see it here in my notes. You know, I just, but the idea of having, that was the other thing I wanted to touch on, was the idea of having a community is a really important part of, you know, doing anything photographic, and that's one of the things that you've really fostered is, you know, creating that community where you can be supportive of one another, you can be critical of one another, and you can, and it's all good. It's all, you know, very positive, and it's one of those things too, where, you know, photography, architecture is very similar. You, in architecture, you go to school and you learn to do projects on your own, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to go out into the real world and you have to work with other people, and that's why architects don't get along with one another.
That's why I'm not a filmmaker.
Well, and it's very similar, you know, being a photographer, it's very personal, right?
Yeah.
But you at some point got to interact with other people if you want to exhibit, if you want to, you know, so learning to be a part of a community and learning how to use that tool to, you know, make yourself better and to support others and to get support from people is a big deal.
Right.
You know, it's a big part of the equation.
Well, my community goal in this case in particular is I want folks to realize that, you know, you're putting your pants on one leg at a time. And, you know, some of my speakers come and they talk about book projects and travel deals and all these other things. And they have no visible way that they got it done. You know, and so I think the realities of getting those things done is something we need to talk about, because it's not fair. You know, that's why, you know, Facebook can be so discouraging, because everybody's got so much cool stuff going on that I can't touch.
Well, that's just it. You're absolutely right. It's
You'll just feel nothing but unaccomplished if you get on there.
Yeah. Well,
Because-
it's right. It's like looking at magazines, you know, and feeling bad about yourself because you're not one of the beautiful people in the magazine, right?
Sure. And that's, you know, that's a thing. It used to be a deal. I don't know, you know, it's like people moved away because now Instagram makes you feel bad instead of the magazines. But
it's the same cycle, right? Like you can look at that stuff and you can, you know, oh gosh, how in the world, it's kind of funny, you know, it's like, I've wondered, you know, you look at some of these photographers, well, you know, Corey Arnold, for example, you know, Nat Geo photographer, very successful, you know, it's like, how did you get there? And it's all that's kind of a mystery, you know, it's like.
he still works on a fishing boat, for God's sake.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he hasn't even gone full time or whatever they call it, because,
yeah,
you know, so, I mean, I think that's kind of a nice reality check right there, you know, and he, again, like, kind of like you, he's like, well, his first important work and where he got all his traction was something he knew really well, which was being on those fishing boats, right?
Yeah.
He didn't like try to fish all day and then take pictures of something exotic that he didn't know anything about.
Yep. Well, and that's the other thing, you know, it's kind of like, that's another thing that I thought about talking about. And I, of course, you know, once I get rolling, I can't remember my little nuggets